The Second Hand. Chapter 2. Vertigo. Noun. A sensation of loss of balance. Conflict between visual and inner ear signals. March 5th, 1899. West of Lakay, Louisiana. Water gurgles beneath rotted roots. Small flies buzz loud in the ear for milliseconds until they disappear. John's mare slows her gait when he shifts back in his saddle. Somewhere in the haze ahead, a shadowed figure sits on a stone, unmoving. Caleb. He doesn't look surprised. Not when John rides up, not when he dismounts, not even when John nods his head like a man introducing himself for the first time, even though they've already met in the dim back light of a French Quarter saloon. And the doctor is mad enough to take the offer. He told himself as much. But a gang doesn't make you an outlaw. It only answers the name the world calls you. It was a fair trade. You found it. Caleb stands up. It wasn't easy. John's boots rustle thick reeds. He nods towards the trees he rode through. Suppose it wasn't meant to be. Caleb watches him, expression unreadable again. They've all been waiting, in their own way. John glances around. The camp's barely visible through the fog, just the outline of wagons and tents beyond the moss-heavy trees. He notices his hands are tense around the leather reins. He loosens them. You knew I'd come? You're here, aren't you? Caleb replies with a smirk. His gaze flicks to John's mare. He pats her neck before looking back toward the camp. Before you go in, just know, this place, Dutch, we don't always make sense. Caleb's gaze moves to John's modest-packed saddlebags, and back to John. You still go by Doctor? John nods. Call me John. Caleb nods back. Then come on, John. I'll walk you in. Caleb had asked if John's horse was cooled down enough to tie. Her muzzle found the fresh hay on the ground fast enough. Then they paced a few more meters, really into camp, and the smell hit, stronger than the horses. Salt, swampwater, sweat. Fish gutted hours ago. The sour of empty liquor bottles strewn about. Caleb walks ahead, slow enough for John to take it in. The camp unfurls in pieces. A cooking fire, still glowing low. Waxy beans scorched to the edge of a pot. A faded red blanket flapping from a line. There's a boot left in dirt, and its pair, still half untied on the foot of a young man, legs crossed, back against a tree, dozing as the sun rises. Sleeping disorder. They move past a young woman with hair like silk, sitting on a blanket on the ground, a book in her lap. Her posture stiffens as John passes, then softens again when she clocks Caleb beside her. Hypervigilance in women. A poker game is underway. Two intimidating-looking younger men, and a man who must be in his 70s. Muscle and intel? The amber-bearded brute sits hunched forward, sweating through his plaid shirt. The Mexican man meets his gaze without stopping a rhythmic humming under his breath. The third player, the old man, with his slightly jaundiced skin, leans back, head resting on his chest. Group ritual to pass time. Competitive bonding. When Caleb stops walking, John does too. There, closest to the water, larger than the rest, Dutch's tent. One half of the opening is drawn back with a piece of rope. Through the gap, a small cot lined with thin sheets is visible. A heavy wooden writing desk wedged next to it for a backboard. On it, fresh-picked flowers in a painted jar. A black comb. A little vanity mirror that's been set on its side. A pile of books. A concise etymological dictionary of the English language. A King James Bible. Poems by Oscar Wilde. John hears the slight tap, tap of a boot heel rustling the reed-like grass near the water behind the tent. He tracks the movement from the east side of the tent to the west, and then back again. Then John feels eyes. He turns his back on the pacing sound to face the circle of smaller tents he'd just been led past, and the group that's gathering. 3 figures are within 6 feet of him now, staring. A white woman with graying hair, arms crossed. A round-bellied man wearing navy-issued trousers, holding a cloth to a heavy frying pan. A young blonde woman, oddly in some sort of trousers of her own. The sheen of a polished blade glistens under the shadow of her left hand. No warm welcome there. But John hasn't got shot yet. The doctor holds back his half-smile, doesn't offer his hand, just meets each gaze, rests his eyes on Caleb, watches the outlaw inhale slow before he speaks again. "This is John," he says to no one and everyone, still looking past Dutch's tent. The sound of pacing stops. The first thing to come through the brush is Dutch's voice, baritone and rumbling. "Well, well, is this the doctor I've been hearing about?" Dutch Vandermeer steps into view with a half-lit cigar in his heavily jeweled fingers. The sleeves of his white cotton shirt are rolled to his elbows, his collar unbuttoned. His vest is neat and pitch black. The gold chain of a pocket watch catches the pink morning light, almost just as bright as the thin layer of sweat against the man's neck. He has a trimmed mustache, not unlike the illustrations John's seen, and his dark, shoulder-length hair stays contained under a black hat. It casts a shadow across eyes that, when they finally rise to meet John's, burn too bright. He sees it then, the sallowness of his cheeks, the faint tremor in Dutch's left hand. Missable, hidden in the sway of his coat. Caleb nods towards Dutch and steps aside. John resets his shoulders. "Didn't think word traveled that fast out here." Dutch takes a slow step forward. Smoke drifts. He chuckles. "Needn't like doctor, you're bound to stir something, especially when, from what we've heard, no one can agree what kind of man you are." The looming man takes another slow step sideways this time, then turns and paces back into place. "You been to war?" Dutch says, matter of fact. John blinks. "Yeah, automatic." "You kill anyone?" "Yes." "Did it break you?" John feels a lurch in his throat. "No." Then the air drops. The cicadas hum again. A dimple appears on Dutch's face for a half-second when his mouth twitches at one side. His gaze drops to the ground between them. The man can't seem to stop moving, nods his head up and down, which turns into a steady roll of his neck and shoulders. Caleb folds his arms. Dutch continues. "I'll call you doctor for now," baritone humming, "till you prove otherwise." The doctor feels the tightness in his neck drop heavy for a second into his chest. Then it's gone. "And I'll call you Dutch," he replies, "till you prove otherwise." A fly buzzes past John's ear. He hears a few quiet chuckles from the nearby tents. Dutch smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. He takes a second pace forward, moving closer to John and the rest of the circle. "Listen now. We save fellers as need savin', feed fellers as need feedin', and shoot fellers as need shootin'. And we are gonna find out what you need." He steps back, takes a drag from his cigar, eyes locked on John, even when he turns to Caleb. "Let's hope he's not too much man for our little garden," Dutch mumbles. Then Dutch breaks the gaze, brushes past Caleb, and disappears into his tent. The heavy smell of his smoke lingers longer than he does. John remembered the feeling when he'd realized it. It was the most expensive cigar he'd ever seen. Caleb shows John where to keep his things. A rolled blanket, his medical kit, his saddlebag filled with a few changes of clothes. John places them inside an empty apple crate that sits next to a wagon on the east side of camp. A tarp is strung over 2 tent poles and attached to the wagon, creating more of a shade than a true tent. 2 other bedrolls are tucked haphazardly into an open whiskey barrel, owners unknown yet to John. Caleb explains that he has something to move in an hour and he needs to warm up his horse. John lets him leave with a soft look of appreciation and a small exchange about the importance of conditioning in equines. Then the doctor's alone again. John only registers it for half a second before he makes his way into the center of camp. He approaches the gray-haired woman from earlier. She's kneeled in front of the cook fire now, working a marsh hen clean. She's the oldest woman in camp, the only one John or Dutch's age, but her arms move over the bird in short, youthful motions. Feathers curl in the smoke. One sticks to her sleeve. "Ma'am," John says, measured. "Thought you might know what needs doing? Something to keep my hands busy?" She looks up, purses her lips. "It's Mara Bradshaw," she states her name, hands stalled as she looks John up and down. "Ma'am works just as well. Yes, I suppose I do know what needs doing, but I'm in charge of the women." Her brows furrow slightly, her eyes seeming to drift into thought for a moment. Then her attention returns to the half-plucked hen in her hand. She starts the work back up and adds, tone softening just a hair, "Mr. Swardson at the cook wagon might make use of you." John nods a thanks and takes the advice. The chuck wagon is overloaded with towering stacks of grain and stacked tins of preserves. The fat man from before, with the blue navy trousers, is peering into a canister of sugar, shaking what contents are left in it. He flashes John a smile once the doctor gets within 10 feet of him. "Doc Holliday," he says loudly, voice lilted. John feels his shoulders tense, and the cook closes the sugar canister, sets it back on the wagon, and steps forward, right hand extended. But the handshake is kind and releases the strain in John's neck. "John Watson," he returns. "Swardson, is it?" Swardson's chin cocks upward, his smile lingers. "So it is." A pause. Then, "Heard you're military." He doesn't give John room to confirm it, just starts drawling as he turns back to his food stores. "That's good for out here. And like us, got a certain kind of mind. I'm Navy, where I learned cooking. You'll see, tonight, when you taste the stew, you'll think, no way old Swardson can make a stew taste so good and shoot straight as an arrow, too." John's eyebrows raise, and he doesn't quite know what to say. "Well, that ain't untrue. I look forward to your stew." John cringes. Christ almighty, a limerick. He swallows hard. "Look, you or the other men needing any help today? I'm used to earning my keep." Swardson continues opening containers, shoulders relaxed, even scratching his backside. Nah, not off the top of my head." The smell of mold hits John suddenly as Swardson opens the jar and revolts with a gagging kind of cough. He places the lid back on the jar and looks up at John, eyes still kind, but showing some tiredness now. "Consider yourself at ease. Don't remember any of us being much use the first day." The cook looks away. John turns, paces a few steps back into the center of camp, thinks of what to do next. 2 more women he hadn't seen before are watching him, hanging laundry on a line strung across 2 trees. They both avert their gaze quickly when he meets it. He decides to head past them, back towards his sleeping space by the eastmost wagon and the apple crate. "You look like a man who used to say 'yes, ma'am' a lot." A buttery voice sounds after he thought he'd walked past them unscathed. He turns on his heel and tries to determine which of them said it. They're both dressed plain, but clean, with hair pinned up and washed. For a group avoiding the law in the swamp, they look civilized. The black woman offers her own comment before there's room for another breath, her voice more tinny than the other. "You gonna stick around?" John's lips part. The words themselves could be jarring in another context, but the way a woman says them is kinder than anything he'd heard in camp so far. But before he can reply, the women start to giggle, lean towards each other, and throw another piece of linen on the line, walling them off from John's view. John exhales through his nose, something like relief. He makes his way back toward the apple crate, retrieves his journal from his saddlebag, and tucks it under his arm. He'd use the rest of the day to get a sense of the land, was his thought, if he couldn't make heads or tails of the outlaw folk. He'd make note of burdock and wild ginger when he saw it, pick it in the morning, and have a salve by tomorrow afternoon. He pulls a small canvas satchel out of his saddlebag, ducks his head under the strap, and sets off north toward the entrance of camp where the ground was higher. Before he's far, a voice stops him cold. "Well, well, don't you look like you belong?" John locates the source of the voice. A sneering, yellow-haired man leaned back against a tree, arms folded. His wide-brim, tan hat was tilted so low John couldn't see his eyes. "Heard we got a real good Samaritan setting up shop. Doctor. Mighty civilized for a man who used to get his britches pulled down behind gentlemen's clubs." John feels heat in his chest. The journal under his arm feels heavier. The sneer peels into a toothy grin, almost childlike, and yellow as the man's hair. "That how it went, Doc? That how you got run out of New Orleans? Or was it something about a rich boy crying to lawyer daddy about your bedside manner?" The doctor feels the fingernails on his left digging into the base of his palm. He snaps to meet the other man's eyes, but all he can see is that grin and the hat. "Not a boy," John hisses. He waits for another 20 seconds, but there's only silence. He continues walking past after that. The yellow-haired man does try again, but only once John's another dozen feet away. "Man, don't deny it. Keep your boys close, ladies." When day turns to night, all the bodies around camp congregate near the central cook fire. John returns with sore feet and his journal in his satchel, sorts and waves to him with a voice full of pride. "Stew's ready." The doctor sits on a cut log a ways back from the pit, bowl in one hand, spoon in the other. The fire cracks and shifts. Sparks drift up and vanish. John finds space to offer a few words of praise to Swordson in between the quiet chatter of the group. The cook smiles at him and returns to talking about the quality of this season's small game with Mara. Cards slap wood. Someone's tuning a banjo out of tune. No one talks to John the rest of the night. No one talks about him either. That's all right by him. He glances toward Dutch's tent. The opening is drawn shut. Lantern light illuminates it from the inside, casting a distorted shadow onto the face of the canvas. From overheard conversation, Dutch hadn't left all day. John finishes his stew and waits for a measured moment before taking his dish to the wash basin and leaving the circle for an early night. He takes off his boots, rubs the arches of both feet. He remembers, when he settles in, how the dirt is cool beneath his bedroll, and how his eyes closed soft. The bayou had hummed, flies, frogs, the thin laugh of someone still at the fire, but it had blurred quick, folded into dream. John slept, the way camp never does. It was easy to think so.